He was a Bratva king built for blood. She was a broken queen who couldn't give him the one thing they both lost. But when a miscarriage shatters their marriage and the Bratva demands an heir, Boris Smirnov must choose his dynasty or his wife. Welcome to Bratva's Heirless Queen, Chapter 1. Anya, the blood on the sheet. It started with a cramp. No, not a cramp, a tear, like something inside her had ripped straight through bone and soul, and now everything that made sense had turned to metal-tasting air and the sound of her own heartbeat hammering in her ears. Anya didn't scream. Bratva queens didn't scream. They walked, they bled. They cleaned their mess before anyone noticed. She gripped the bathroom counter, her palms flat, breath locked in her throat as hot pain ripped through her lower belly. The silk of her nightgown clung to her thighs, soaked and sticky. She didn't look down. She didn't need to. She already knew. The baby was gone, just like the last one. She slipped on the tiled floor as she moved, landing hard on her knees. Her hands fumbled for the phone. No, not to call Boris. He couldn't know. Not this time. Not again. She'd promised him this child. Swore her body would hold on to it. That this time she wouldn't fail. The phone slipped from her trembling fingers, skidding across the floor as warm blood spread between her thighs, pooling in a violent halo beneath her. No sound came from her. No sob, no gasp, only silence, loud and punishing. The kind that came when your soul quietly gave up. Anya pulled herself upright by the counter, her nails gouging into the marble. Her face in the mirror was unrecognizable, pale, empty-eyed, too still. She looked like a ghost. Maybe she was one. The baby was 6 weeks along. They hadn't told anyone, not even their doctor. She'd insisted on privacy, on control. She hadn't wanted the pressure, the whispers, the weight of the Bratva watching her womb. So now there was no one to call, no one but herself. She climbed into the shower on shaking legs, turned the water scalding hot, watched the blood swirl down the drain like wine from a shattered glass. She pressed a hand to her flat stomach. It was over. By the time Boris returned that night, everything was pristine. The bathroom scrubbed, the towels changed. Her body lotioned and dressed in one of the silk slips he'd bought her from Milan. She stood at the bedroom window, looking out at the snow-covered courtyard like she hadn't just buried a piece of herself down the drain. The door clicked open behind her. She didn't turn. "Where were you?" she asked. His voice came low, rough. "Meeting with the Novikovs ran long." She nodded once. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. She could feel the blood again, not between her legs, between her ribs, under her skin, a phantom hemorrhage. He stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist like he always did, lips brushing her shoulder. His touch was careful. Loving. Too loving. Her stomach turned. She leaned away gently. "I'm tired." "Are you okay?" "Just tired," she lied, slipping from his embrace. "I'm going to bed early." She could feel his gaze following her like a blade tracing her spine. He didn't press, he never pressed. And that was the problem. Hours passed. He went to his office. She curled into bed with her back to the door, every muscle screaming from pretending to be whole. She could still feel the warmth of blood between her thighs. She could still feel the promise of a child dissolving inside her like salt in boiling water. The first tear fell silent. So did the second. By the time her pillow was wet, her heart was already in ruins. Boris was the kind of man who inspired fear even in silence. When he entered a room, people stopped breathing. But he never raised his voice to her. Never touched her in anger, never made her feel anything but chosen. She remembered how he'd kissed her the night he found out she was pregnant. He hadn't smiled like a man expecting an heir. He'd smiled like a man expecting a miracle. She had given him none, and the Bratva would notice soon. They kept track of months, of her stomach, of his restraint. There were rules in the Vori, expectations, legacies. Boris had broken them all to keep her. She had no legacy to give. Somewhere around dawn she felt him slip into bed beside her, his warmth curled around her like a wall of heat. She didn't move, didn't speak, but then his hand slid to her stomach, not to touch, but to hold, gently, reverently, and something inside her cracked so loudly she swore he heard it. She shoved his hand away. "Don't." He stilled behind her. "Anya, don't touch me like that." "Like what?" "Like you still think I'm going to give you something." His silence was deafening. She sat up, the bedsheets falling around her like spilled ivory. His voice was a whisper. "Talk to me," she laughed. A single sharp sound. Talk to you? About what, Boris? About the blood I scrubbed off the floor? The way I flushed our future before it had a heartbeat? He sat up too, naked to the waist, eyes shadowed and dark. You think that's what I care about? She couldn't look at him. If she did, she'd fall apart. Don't lie to me. I'm not. Then why are you still here? Her voice broke. Why haven't you gone looking for someone who can give you what I can't? Because I already found her, he said, deadly soft. And I'm not letting her bleed alone again. Her breath caught. Her spine straightened. What did you say? He moved closer, cupping her face even as she flinched. His thumb caught a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. You think I didn't know? He whispered. Anya, I smelled the blood the second I walked in. You think you can hide that from me? Shame tore through her. Then why didn't you say anything? Because I wanted you to tell me. I wanted you to let me hold the pieces. Not hide them, she stared at him. Boris Smirnov, Bratva, destroyer of kings, worshipper of her broken body. Why? She whispered. His voice was pure fire. Because you are not the child you lost. You are not your womb. You are the woman who carries my name, my soul, my fucking purpose. If you can't give me an heir, then I will crown you anyway. You are my queen, irreplaceable. The sob that ripped out of her chest wasn't soft. It was guttural. And he caught her in it, held her through it, cradled her like something holy. And that night, for the first time since the blood and the silence, Anya didn't feel empty. She felt his, and maybe, just maybe, that would be enough to survive this.
Chapter 2. Boris. Don't shut me out. She thought she was hiding it from me. The blood. The silence. The way her hands trembled just slightly when she reached for her teacup that morning. Chipped black nails trying to look elegant, but shaking like a goddamn earthquake lived inside her wrists. Anya's grief was quiet. Mine was violent. I didn't say a word when I saw the freshly laundered towels in the bathroom, like the color red had never touched them. Did she think I wouldn't notice the missing vitamins on her nightstand? The way her eyes didn't shine when she passed the nursery we'd never finished? She thought I was distracted. Busy. Caught up in Bratva bullshit. What she didn't understand was I'd built a kingdom of monsters just to give her something no one could take, freedom. And now she was bleeding inside it. And locking me out. Mikhail was already waiting when I arrived at the clinic. The same one she thought I didn't know she'd gone to 2 weeks ago, wearing a scarf and sunglasses like a fucking civilian. My second-in-command tried to look away when I lit a cigarette in the waiting room. We both knew I wasn't supposed to be there. The doctor, a tired woman in her 50s who probably thought she'd seen it all, walked out with a folder in her hand and eyes too damn soft for my liking. I can't share private. I fund this clinic. I cut in, taking the folder. You can share whatever the fuck I tell you to share. Her jaw tightened. But she didn't stop me. They never did. I read it in silence. The words stabbing deeper with every page. Spontaneous miscarriage. No fetal heartbeat. Recommended monitoring for future conception risks. History of prior trauma. She hadn't even written my name in the partner field. That nearly undid me. She was alone? I asked quietly. The doctor looked at me, then away. She didn't want anyone else to know. Of course she didn't. My woman, proud and vicious even when broken. She ever come back here again without me, you call me. Directly. She won't have a choice. I snapped, then caught myself. Ran a hand through my hair. Fuck. She's not just my wife, I added softer. She's everything. That night, I didn't sleep. She did. Barely. She curled up on her side like she always did when she wanted to feel small. When she wanted to disappear. I let her. Let her have the illusion of control. The fantasy that she could pull away from me piece by piece until there was nothing left but a silk robe and a quiet funeral in her eyes. But in the morning, when she woke, I was already dressed and waiting. I want to take you somewhere. She blinked at me over the rim of her teacup. Where? I didn't answer. Just held out my hand. She didn't take it. That made my jaw clench. My fingers curled against my palm like I could crush the ache down into something manageable. We're not doing this, Anya. She stood, graceful as ever. Doing what? Pretending. Her spine stiffened. You said last night you wouldn't push. I lied. Typical. That earned me a flicker of something. A spark. Still sharp under all that grief. Put something warm on, I said. We're leaving in 10. The drive was quiet. My guards trailed at a respectful distance. I'd ordered them not to speak. Not to even breathe too loud. Anya stared out the window the whole time, not once asking where we were going. That scared me more than anything. She used to interrogate me over every damn surprise like I was planning a coup. Now, she just let me drive. She didn't even flinch when we turned off the main road into the countryside. Snow-covered trees lined the path like sentries. Peaceful. Deceptive. Like her. We pulled up to the gate. Old wrought iron, blackened by decades of ice and ash. She frowned. This isn't. I cut the engine and stepped out before she could finish. When I opened her door, she didn't move. Get out, I said softly. Please. That got her attention. I didn't say please. Not to anyone. She stepped into the cold like she couldn't feel it. The estate beyond the gate was something I'd built 5 years ago. Not for the Bratva. Not for power. For her. She didn't know about it. Didn't know that every inch of that greenhouse down the hill had been designed to hold her in spring even during the harshest Russian winters. She didn't know about the peonies I'd had flown in from Kazan, or the hand-carved bench in the center engraved with her initials. Didn't know I'd come here after every lost battle, every betrayal, just to remember why I kept fighting. She followed me through the garden path in silence, then stopped cold when we reached the glass greenhouse. What is this? Her voice cracked. It's yours. The door creaked open. Heat from inside steamed the frost on the panes. The scent of roses and damp earth enveloped us. She walked in like she was afraid it would vanish if she breathed too loud. You built this for me? She whispered. Yes. When? Before we were even married. She turned to me. Why? I stepped in, letting the warmth close around us. Because I knew one day you'd need a place to break that wasn't made of blood. She looked around at the flowers, rows of blooming pink, white, red, violet. Some of them struggling, others thriving. Like her. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the small black box. Her eyes narrowed. Don't. I'm not replacing anything, I said firmly. I'm reminding you. Inside the box was a thin platinum ring. Not a new wedding band, no. A second one, etched with the word always. I handed it to her without fanfare. I'm not here to save you from the pain, I said. I'm here to carry it. Until you can walk again. Until you can breathe without choking on it. Her hands shook as she took it. You can't fix this, she said, voice broken. I know. Then why are you still trying? Because you're still mine. She stared at the ring. Then at me. Then back again. And when she slid it onto her finger, underneath the first one, I felt my lungs finally unlock. She didn't cry. But I did. Not in sobs. In silence. Watching her stand there in the middle of a blooming world I built just for her. And realizing I'd spend the rest of my life proving what I said last night. That she wasn't my heir-bearer. She was my queen. And I didn't fucking replace queens.
Chapter 3. Anya, the queen they can't see. A Bratva queen was never allowed to show weakness. Not in her steps. Not in her voice. Not in her womb. So Anya wore a crimson dress cut to the bone, lips painted darker than blood, and diamonds heavy enough to hold her spine straight. The emerald set Boris had custom cut to match her eyes swung from her ears like weapons, glinting under the chandeliers of the Smirnov Winter Gala. She smiled, she walked, she played the part with all the practiced grace of a prima ballerina trained to pirouette on broken feet. They didn't know, not about the blood, not about the loss, not about the way she'd screamed into her pillow 2 nights ago until her throat burned and no sound came out. The only person who knew stood across the room in a midnight black tuxedo, watching her with the weight of a man who had survived a war he never wanted to fight. And lost anyway. Boris hadn't said a word about the miscarriage since the greenhouse. He hadn't needed to. There was something terrifying about how he loved her. Quiet, endless, absolute. As if even her shattered pieces still belonged on his throne. But she knew the Bratva didn't love that way. And they were watching. Every smile, every step, every time she reached for Boris and didn't quite touch. The wives whispered. She saw it in the way Alina Volkova tilted her head, heard it in the forced cheer when Yelena Kuznetsov hugged her too tight and said, "You're glowing. Any news you want to share?" Anya had smiled. Just wine and good lighting. They laughed. Too loud. Too sharp. Women with wombs like currency. Women who'd birthed sons with their eyes and husbands' last names. Women who believed a queen who couldn't bear a child was nothing more than a pretty consort in a gilded cage. She didn't flinch. Not in front of them. But later, after the 5th toast and 7th lie, She stepped into the hall alone and leaned against the marble, one hand pressed flat to her stomach. The skin there felt hollow, not flat, not empty, hollow, like someone had scooped out everything that made her a woman and left behind silk and skin and the memory of blood on cold tile. "I was wondering when you'd snap." The voice was female, dry, familiar. Anya turned. Alina Volkova stood at the end of the hallway, her golden hair perfect, her red lips curled in that faint smirk she'd worn since the day she married the second most powerful man in the Moscow syndicate. "Don't flatter yourself," Anya said, pushing off the wall. Alina's heels clicked as she approached. "You know, I almost felt sorry for you. All that beauty and nothing to show for it. It must kill you." Anya didn't respond. That was her mistake. Alina smiled wider. "How long are you planning to fake it? Boris won't wait forever. None of them do. Men like our husbands need an heir, not a barren doll." She moved to pass. Anya stepped into her path. She didn't raise her voice, didn't touch her. Just leaned in close enough that only Alina could hear. "You're right," Anya said softly. "Men like ours need heirs, but Boris doesn't need a womb. He needs a queen." Alina's mouth opened. Anya didn't let her speak. "And just in case you forgot, your husband kneels when my husband enters the room. So remind me, Alina, what does that make you?" The silence snapped. Alina flushed, fury twitching beneath flawless foundation. "You think diamonds and silk make you royalty? You're just a desperate bitch with an empty crib." Anya smiled, then slapped her. Not hard, but loud enough to echo. Alina gasped, staggering back, hand flying to her cheek. "Be careful, Sestra," Anya murmured, voice like velvet over steel. "Or I'll show you what a desperate bitch really looks like." She turned on her heel and walked away, heels silent against the marble, heart hammering so loud she was afraid it might break her ribs. Boris found her 5 minutes later on the balcony. Snow dusted the railing, the cold bit through her satin sleeves. But she didn't move. He didn't say a word, just draped his coat around her shoulders and leaned beside her, arms folded. "You hit her," he said after a moment. "She deserved it." "I didn't say she didn't." She glanced at him. "You going to punish me?" His smile was small, dangerous. "I think you just reminded the Bratva why no one touches my queen." The words hit harder than any bullet. His queen. Still. Even now. Even after her body had betrayed them both. "Boris," she whispered. He turned to her, all shadow and snowlight. "I don't want to pretend anymore." His brow furrowed. "Pretend what? That I'm okay, that I'm enough, that I don't see the way they look at me." He stepped closer. "They can look," he said. "They can whisper, but they'll never see what I do." "What do you see?" He reached up and brushed her hair from her face, the back of his fingers warm against her frozen skin. "I see the woman who gave me her heart when she didn't owe me her time. I see the queen who stood beside me when the Bratva tried to kill us both. I see the only person I would burn this city to the ground for." Tears burned her eyes. She didn't blink them away this time. "I'm afraid you'll regret me." "I already regret one thing," he murmured, cupping her jaw. "What?" "That I let you believe for even 1 second that you had to be anything other than mine." His kiss wasn't soft. It was furious. Like he wanted to kiss every wound she'd carved into herself with guilt and grief, and she kissed him back like he was air, fire, and the only thing that still made her feel alive. That night, in their room, he undressed her slowly. No rush, no dominance, just devotion. He didn't fuck her. He loved her, not gently, but reverently, possessively, hands roaming over her body like he was memorizing every scar, every stretch, every failure she thought lived under her skin. "You are not broken," he whispered against her throat. "You are battle-worn, and every wound makes you mine." She didn't cry. She screamed. And for the first time since the miscarriage, it wasn't from pain. It was from being wanted exactly as she was.
Chapter 4 Boris. The last thing I'd replace. Alina Volkova's cheek still bore the ghost of Anya's slap the next morning. And Boris made sure everyone saw it. He stood at the head of the long oak table in the Vori conference chamber, a place where blood oaths were sworn and men died over glances. Around him, the Bratva elite were seated, underbosses, lieutenants, financiers, and enforcers. The table gleamed with wealth and violence. And still, all anyone could talk about was the fact that Boris Smirnov's wife had struck another Bratva queen and walked away untouched. Unapologetic. Unrepentant. As if she wasn't heirless. As if she wasn't expendable. As if she wasn't a liability to a legacy built on bloodlines. You going to address the issue? Sergei Rolanov, ever bold, leaned back in his chair, sipping espresso like he didn't value his tongue. Boris's knuckles flexed once on the table. What issue is that? Sergei gave a crooked smile. The one with your wife. She laid hands on Alina, in front of witnesses. And Sergei chuckled, trying to lighten the air, but his eyes darted around for support. We can't let the women turn this into a soap opera. It makes us look soft. You think I look soft? The question dropped like a guillotine. The room stilled. Sergei swallowed. Of course not, Pakhan. But optics. Boris leaned forward, palms flat on the table. You're worried about optics when half of you sit here with mistresses in the South and illegitimate sons waiting in prep schools, praying they don't find out who their fathers really are? Murmurs, shifting in seats. Anya is not your queen, Boris said, voice darkening. She is mine. She walks with my name, under my crest, and wears the diamonds I bought with blood you were too afraid to spill. He paused, made sure they all looked at him. Made sure she looked at him too, Alina, seated at the far end of the table beside her husband, trying to tilt her head just so to hide the red. Boris didn't blink, didn't breathe. Let the silence burn like acid through the air. If any of you have something to say about my wife, he said coldly, say it now. I'll be happy to remove your teeth so you can never whisper about her again. Silence. As expected. Cowards, all of them, when faced with a man who didn't need an heir to wield power, who didn't need sons to make kings bow. He had Anya, and that was enough. Later that afternoon, he sat in his office staring at the surveillance feed on the corner monitor, watching her in the courtyard below. Anya was feeding the swans. In another life, that might have seemed like a poetic image. Graceful woman. White birds. Winter sunshine slanting through bare trees. But he didn't see Grace. He saw war. She stood there in boots and a wool cloak, chin high, eyes distant, like she was still bleeding somewhere beneath her skin, but had learned how to weaponize the ache. She had been right the night of the gala. She wasn't okay, but she was fighting. He would take that. Over silence. Over surrender. Over death. Every damn time. A knock came. Mikhail stepped in, shutting the door behind him. She's not happy, his second-in-command said flatly. Alina. She wants blood. Or apology. She's not getting either. Mikhail shrugged, unimpressed. I told her you'd say that. Boris stood, walking to the bar and pouring himself a drink. He didn't offer one to Mikhail. This wasn't a social call. She's baiting Anya, Boris said, trying to spark a replacement narrative. Mikhail raised a brow. It's working. Some of the younger lieutenants are wondering why you haven't produced an heir yet. I haven't produced an heir, Boris said, voice low, because I haven't needed one. You might. Boris's eyes lifted slowly. Mikhail didn't flinch. Brave. Foolish. Loyal. You're not wrong, Boris said. But if this organization falls because I chose love over lineage, then it was never worth saving to begin with. He downed the vodka in one swallow, the glass slamming back onto the bar like a gavel. Alina won't be a problem, Boris said. Mikhail's mouth quirked. You going to kill her? No, shame. I'm going to make her irrelevant. How? Boris gave a cruel smile. I'm going to remind them all who actually rules this empire. He found Anya in her dressing room that evening, barefoot in leggings and an oversized sweater, hair twisted into a loose knot. No diamonds. No facade. Just her. And somehow, that version of her destroyed him more than the queen they saw at the galas. Hey, she said when she saw him in the doorway. Hey. He watched her brush lotion over her arms, so casual, like her presence didn't make his lungs tight with need. I thought you had meetings. I did. Bad ones. Bloody ones. She paused. Do I want to know? No, she nodded once, then went back to her ritual. He walked in slow. Quiet. You hit Alina, he said. I know. You scared the hell out of her. She stopped, turned to face him. Good. He stepped closer, his hands finding her hips, tugging her against him. Do it again, and I'll bend you over the Volkova's dining table and make you scream until their staff has to call security. Her eyes narrowed. Then, finally, she smiled. There he is, she whispered. He kissed her. Hard. Deep. Like he needed to remind them both that the world might question her worth, but he never would. When they pulled apart, she pressed her forehead to his chest. Do you ever wonder, she said softly, if we'll regret not trying again? He didn't answer right away. Because yes, he did wonder. But not in the way she meant. He regretted that she'd been made to believe her value was tied to something so fragile. That anyone, even for a second, had made her doubt what she was. What she'd always been. "I don't need a child to leave behind," he said into her hair. "I need you beside me when I take my last breath." Her shoulders shook. But this time it wasn't pain. It was release. Later that night, when the fire was low and her body was boneless beside his, he kissed her shoulder and whispered into her skin. "They want a future, Anya. Let them build one with their sons." He slid his hand over her stomach. "No baby. No promise. Just her. I already have my legacy."
Chapter 5. Anya, don't love me like that. She hated how softly he touched her, how his fingers skimmed over her skin like she was spun from glass instead of grief, how he held her in bed like something fragile, sacred, breakable. He never used to touch her legs. Before, Boris had claimed her body like he was built to ruin it. Now he asked with his eyes, waited, watched, and it made her feel like she was already dead. Anya lay awake next to him, the glow from the fireplace flickering across their bedroom walls. His hand was warm over her hip, his breathing steady, controlled. Always so controlled now. She was sick of being coddled, sick of being held like a violin with one cracked string, delicate, unpredictable, easily silenced. She turned toward him. "Stop touching me like that," she whispered. His eyes opened immediately. He didn't move. Just blinked at her, assessing, alert, like a soldier waking to the scent of smoke. "I'm not touching you," he said quietly. "Yes, you are," she bit out, voice shaking. Every time we lie in this bed, you treat me like I'll vanish if you press too hard." His brow furrowed. "Anya, no," she sat up. "Don't say my name like that, like I'm a patient, like I'm something to be managed." Boris sat up too, dragging a hand through his hair. "I don't think of you that way." "Then stop touching me like a fucking apology." He stared at her, not angry, worse, worried. "You think I pity you?" he asked, voice low. "I think you don't want me to break," she said, "so you keep pretending I'm not already broken." She climbed out of bed, pulling on the silk robe she'd discarded hours earlier. The fabric clung to her damp skin. She felt exposed, hollow in every way a woman could be. "Anya," he said again, standing, "what's really happening here?" She turned on him, arms wrapped tight around herself. "I can't take it anymore," she said. "The way you look at me, like I'm something to protect. Like you're waiting for me to heal." "I am," he said. "I'm waiting because I know you're still bleeding somewhere I can't reach." She laughed, sharp and cruel. "I'm not healing, Boris. There's nothing to come back from. This is it. This is me now, an empty fucking cradle and a body that won't carry what you deserve." His expression cracked, just slightly. And it shattered something in her. "I wanted to give you a child," she whispered. "God, I wanted to give you something you could name after your father, something that would prove I belonged in this world you built." "You do," he said instantly. "You belong more than any of them." "No, I don't," she snapped. "You don't see it because you love me, but I see it, every day, in their eyes, in my eyes." He took a slow step forward, then another, but she backed away like his touch burned. "I'm still your wife," she said, voice cracking. "But I'm not your equal. I'm not your legacy. I'm just the woman you married because you thought she'd carry your empire in her womb. Stop." The command cracked like a whip. She froze. His voice was ice, controlled, deadly. "You want to bleed on me, fine," he said, stepping closer. "You want to scream, break dishes, burn this fucking mansion to the ground, fine. I'll hand you the match. But don't you ever put that lie in my mouth again." She opened her lips, but he was already in front of her, taking her face in his hands. "I didn't marry you to carry my empire," he growled. "I married you because you are my empire. I married you because there is no fucking throne without you sitting beside it." Her eyes blurred. "You say you're not healing. But you are. Every time you open your mouth and spit fire, every time you breathe when it hurts to, you are healing." She shook her head, tears falling. He pressed his forehead to hers. "You say you're broken," he whispered. "But broken things don't fight like you do. Broken things don't slap Bratva wives and stand taller for it. They don't get back in my bed and let me hold them, even when they're drowning." She couldn't breathe. He kissed her, hard, fierce, like he was trying to breathe life back into her lungs with his own, and then he pulled back, eyes blazing. "You want me to stop loving you like this?" he rasped. "You want me to touch you like I used to?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. because he grabbed her, spun her around, and shoved her against the wall. Her robe slipped down one shoulder. He didn't give her time to think. Didn't give her room to retreat. His mouth claimed her neck, his hands gripping her hips like he was carving his initials into her soul. She gasped, not in protest, in need. "Say it again," he growled against her throat. "Tell me you're not enough." Her voice broke. He dragged her robe off, dropped it to the floor, and pressed his chest against her bare back, one hand sliding up to cup her breasts, the other between her thighs. She trembled. "I would kill kings to keep you," he said, voice raw. "And you think I give a single fuck about a child?" She whimpered, arching back into him. "Tell me what you are to me," he ordered. Say it." "You're queen." He gripped her throat lightly, turning her face so he could kiss her. "Say it again." "You're queen," she gasped. He turned her around, lifted her, and carried her to the bed. Didn't throw her down, laid her there, then stripped, slowly, dangerously. When he came over her, he didn't take her gently. He took her completely. And she gave in, nails digging into his shoulders, thighs locking around his hips like she wanted him to crawl inside her and rebuild her from the inside out. They didn't speak. Didn't need to. Her body cried for everything her words couldn't carry. And his answered. Over and over again. After, when she lay sprawled across his chest, dazed and sore, her lips grazed his collarbone. "I don't want to be soft anymore," she whispered. "I want to be real." He stroked her hair. "You already are." She looked up at him, and for the first time in weeks, she believed him.
Chapter 6. Boris. My vow didn't end at her womb. The thing no one knew about Boris Smirnov was that he had made only one true vow in his life. And it wasn't to the Bratva. It was to her. Not in the cathedral. Not in front of the Vori elite. Not with gold rings or priestly blessings. That had been for optics, for power, control, hierarchy. For empire. His real vow had been made the night before their wedding. In silence. Beneath a moonless Moscow sky. With her asleep beside him, face tucked into his chest, one hand resting over his heart. She'd said his name in her sleep. Like it was a prayer. Like she believed it would protect her. And he'd stared at the ceiling of that room, eyes wide open, chest hollowed by the magnitude of her trust, and whispered a promise into the dark. You will never be replaceable. Not for blood. Not for legacy. Not for anything. Even if she never heard it, even if the world turned on her, he wouldn't. Now, 3 years later, that vow echoed louder than ever. He stood at the edge of the private greenhouse just after sunrise, suit jacket folded over one arm, sleeves rolled up. The early light made the frost on the glass shimmer like ash. The heater vents kept the inside warm, but Boris didn't feel the chill regardless. His blood ran hot. Not with anger, but purpose. A single chair sat beneath the arched rose trellis. He'd placed it there before dawn. In his hands, he held a leather-bound journal. Not a Bratva ledger. Not a kill list. A memory. He opened to the page marked April 17th, wedding day. Her hair smelled like honey and steel. She didn't tremble when she walked toward me. She didn't smile. Not because she wasn't happy, but because she was a woman walking into war. Unafraid. No veil. No illusions. Just truth. God, how do you not fall to your knees for that kind of woman? He'd written it that night. Before the blood. Before the womb. Before the emptiness. Before the silence. Boris turned the page, scanning entries written in jagged, tight script. His journal was full of her. Moments stolen in between life and war. She cut her fingers slicing peaches. Bled on the marble. Refused help. Stuck her hand under cold water and muttered curses in Russian, so ancient I didn't understand them. I kissed the blood. She called me a lunatic. But her eyes softened. Another page. I watched her undress tonight like she was shedding armor, not silk. She doesn't know I see the bruises she hides. The ones no one gave her but herself. He clenched the book in his hand. And closed it. The Bratva didn't understand. Legacy wasn't just bloodlines. It was what you left behind in another person's soul. And Anya carried all of him. The door behind him opened. Soft footsteps. He didn't turn. Your guard said you'd be here, she murmured. He smiled faintly. Did you bribe them? Threatened, actually. One's considering early retirement. He turned. She was barefoot, wrapped in a long cream sweater, leggings clinging to her thighs. Her hair was half up, strands curling around her face in soft waves. No jewelry. No makeup. Still the most devastating thing he'd ever seen. Couldn't sleep, she said. Me neither. She crossed to him, eyes flicking to the journal. What's that? He held it out. Read it. She hesitated, then took it. She sat in the chair. The sunlight caught the copper in her hair, and he knew, if the Bratva burned down his entire kingdom, he'd let it fall for this one image alone. She flipped pages in silence, and then her breath caught. He knew which line she'd reached. If her body never bears me a son, I'll still die knowing I was the only man she ever looked at like that. And God, that's more than I ever deserved. Tears welled in her eyes. Why did you write all this? She whispered. Because I knew there'd be a day when you'd forget how much I see you. She blinked rapidly. Boris, he knelt in front of her. Not out of tradition, out of reverence. He took her hand and placed it over his chest. You think I made vows at the altar, he said quietly. But the real vow I made it to your breath in my lungs. I made it to your voice in my fucking veins. Her lip trembled. I don't want a legacy if it means losing you, he said. I don't want heirs who don't carry your fire in their blood. And I sure as fuck don't want a kingdom if you're not beside me to rule it. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his. You always say the exact thing I need to hear, she murmured. I don't speak for them, he whispered. I speak for us. Her hands cupped his face. Then speak, she said. Because I'm listening now. He rose, pulling her to her feet with him, journal dropping to the floor. His hands found her waist, lips brushing her temple. I know it hurts, he murmured. But you are not a graveyard. You're the garden I built to survive winter. Her body collapsed against his. And for the first time since the miscarriage, she let herself sob. Not silent, not small, loud, violent, shaking. And he held her through every tremor. I wanted to carry something for you, she cried. I wanted to be your legacy. You are, he said. And I will remind you until your dying breath if I have to. She looked up at him, cheeks soaked, eyes red, lips parted. Marry me again, she whispered. His brows lifted. What? Marry me again, she repeated. Not for the Bratva. Not for optics. Just you and me. And that vow you whispered when I was sleeping. His heart stopped, then thundered. Yes, he said without hesitation. Yes, 1,000 times. The next morning, he placed a call to Italy. Not for diamonds. For iron. He wanted her second ring forged, not set. Unpolished. Imperfect. A symbol of the fire they had walked through. Because his first vow was made in silence. But the next one? The next one would be made with blood. And everyone would hear it.
Chapter 7. Anya, the Other Woman. It was a mistake. She knew it the second her thumb hovered over the phone screen. Boris's phone, abandoned on the edge of the marble sink while he stepped into the shower. The steam was already fogging the mirror, his shadow moving behind the frosted glass, head tilted under the hot spray. She shouldn't have touched it. She never checked his phone. Because she didn't need to. Because he was hers. Because he never gave her a reason to doubt. Until now, the name stared back at her. Dr. Kira Belov, one unread message. Her thumb tapped before her thoughts could stop it. Will you be bringing your wife to the next appointment? We need to decide how aggressively you want to pursue implantation. Her stomach turned. Implantation. Implantation? Another message, 2 days before. She'll need a full cycle before we can proceed. I know this wasn't what you expected, but the donor you selected is an ideal match. Donor. Ideal match. Cycle. The words splintered in her chest like glass in water, quiet and sharp. She scrolled further. There were more, weeks worth, medical language, tests, alternatives, long-term fertility management. She barely felt the phone slip from her fingers and hit the counter with a soft clatter. Her breath vanished from her lungs like she'd been sucker punched. He was planning this. He was planning everything without her. The grief she'd been holding together with steel and silk turned molten. So this was it. He'd smiled, he'd kissed her, he'd told her she was his legacy. And the whole time, he'd been shopping for a womb behind her back. She didn't wait for him to get out of the shower. She didn't wait to yell or cry or beg for answers. She walked out of the suite in nothing but her robe and bare feet, heart racing, hands shaking, rage and heartbreak climbing her throat like poison ivy. She passed 2 guards in the hallway. Neither dared speak. They didn't even meet her eyes. Smart. Because if they had, she would have torn the walls down with her teeth. She didn't stop walking until she was outside. Snow blanketed the courtyard, fresh from an early storm. The sting of cold against her skin was nothing compared to the storm inside her. She paced toward the black SUV parked near the east exit and yanked open the passenger door. Mikhail sat in the driver's seat, sipping coffee, clearly not expecting her. "Drive," she snapped. He blinked. "Where?" "I don't care." "Anya, drive. Or I swear to God, I'll walk barefoot to the Volkov estate and tell them what Boris's donors are up to." That got him moving. He didn't speak again until they were on the road. Did he do something? She stared out the window, voice raw. "Don't ask me that." But the answer was yes. He had betrayed her. Not with a mistress, not with lies, but with hope. With the silent, quiet hope that somewhere in the science and schedules and vials of other women's blood, they could create a child without her body, without her soul, without her. Boris stepped out of the shower 20 minutes later, drying his hair with a towel, only to find his bedroom empty. No scent of her lotion, no robe on the floor, her phone gone, her shoes missing, his blood iced. He checked the security feed. Camera 3, courtyard. Anya barefoot, furious. Camera 4, black SUV. Mikhail. Fuck. He snatched his own phone from the counter and saw it immediately. Unread messages. Kira Belov. And the sinking weight of why she'd left hit him in the gut like a crowbar. God damn it. It took him 1 hour to find them. They weren't far. Just parked outside a pine-lined forest road where Anya used to walk with him during summer nights. It was one of her quiet places. He approached the car on foot. Mikhail met him at the edge of the lot, hands in his coat pockets. "She's pissed," he said simply. Understatement of the century. "She hit the seat so hard the glove compartment popped open." "Good. She won't let me talk." "She'll let me. Will she?" Mikhail raised a brow. "You kind of fucked this one, boss." "Thanks for the insight," Boris muttered, then walked to the car. He opened the door. She didn't look at him. Her arms were folded, face turned toward the window, jaw clenched so tight he could see the muscle jump beneath her skin. He slid into the driver's seat, didn't speak, just sat, waited. She spoke first. "How long?" His voice was low, controlled. "I started talking to her after the second miscarriage." She turned her head slowly, eyes blazing. The one I didn't even know you knew about." His jaw tightened. "Yes." Her laugh was brittle. "So let me get this straight. You told me I wasn't broken, that I was your queen, your legacy, your whole fucking empire, and all the while you were out shopping for uteruses." "It's not like that." "Then what is it like, Boris?" she hissed. "Because to me it looks an awful lot like betrayal." He stared at her, and then he did the most unexpected thing. He pulled a manila folder from his coat pocket and dropped it onto her lap. She stared down at it. "Open it." "No. Anya, open it." With shaking fingers, she flipped the folder open and froze. Inside were letters. From him, to her, all undelivered, all dated. Weeks, months, 2 years' worth, handwritten, raw, rambling. Some were no more than a few lines. "I can't stand watching you hurt and not knowing how to stop it. Every time you smile at the nursery door, I want to smash it shut so you don't break again. I would rather grow old childless with you than raise 100 heirs with someone else." "I wasn't planning anything behind your back," Boris said. "I was trying to understand how to carry this with you. Not without you." She said nothing. "I went to Belov to know the science, not to replace you. I never moved forward. I never scheduled anything without you. And the donor she mentioned? That was a mistake. She sent it assuming I'd want options." "Did you?" "No," he said instantly, "because the only womb I want carrying my name is the one that already carries my fucking heart." Tears slid down her cheeks, but this time they weren't angry, they were shattered. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. "Why didn't you show me these?" "Because every time I looked at you," he said, "I thought I'd lose you if I said the wrong thing. And now? And now? Now I realize I'd rather lose everything than let you believe you're anything less than the whole damn world to me." She reached for his hand and held it, tight, then tighter, until her tears turned to sobs and her body leaned into his, finally giving in, finally breaking, and letting him catch every piece.
Chapter 8. Boris. How dare you leave me? She walked out on me. Without a word. Without a fight. Without a fucking scream. She took her silence and her grief in my heart and walked out of my house like she was nothing to me. Like I was nothing to her. The first hour, I told myself to wait. To breathe. The second hour, I destroyed my study. The third, I stopped pretending she was coming back on her own. Because she'd left me once before. When the miscarriage bled her dry and she smiled like it didn't kill her. That time, she left without leaving the house. This time, she took the whole fucking soul of it with her. I kicked open the cabin door. Snow slammed in behind me, cold and stinging against my neck. Mikhail stood back by the SUV, wise enough not to follow me. Anya was sitting on the old leather couch, her knees pulled to her chest, wrapped in that oversized sweater I bought her last winter. The one she wore when she didn't want to be seen. She didn't even flinch when the door hit the wall. That made it worse. "You shouldn't be here," she said flatly. I shut the door. "You shouldn't have left." I needed space. Space. I snapped, stalking toward her. From what? From me? From the truth? From the fact that you'd rather think I betrayed you than believe I might be drowning in the same pain. She stood slowly, calm, controlled, and it made me rage. "I didn't come here to argue," she said. "No, you came here to run." I stopped in front of her. Again, I wasn't ready to talk. "Bullshit. You just didn't want to hear what I had to say." She looked up at me, eyes glassy but dry. "You planned a future without me." "No," I growled. "I planned how to keep you when you finally decided you weren't enough." That broke something in her. And I saw it, right in her eyes. The truth hitting so hard it cracked her mask. I stepped closer. "I've killed men for looking at you wrong," I said, voice low and sharp. "I've bled for you, burned for you. But you leaving me? Without even fighting? That's what will kill me." Her lip trembled. I didn't know how to stay. "You're not a prisoner." "No. I'm a disappointment in designer silk." "Fuck that." I grabbed her wrist, gently but firmly, and pulled her hand to my chest. "Do you feel that?" I asked. Her palm was flat over my heartbeat, fast and brutal beneath her skin. "That's what you do to me," I said. "No heir. No future. Just you. You keep this heart fucking alive, Anya." She blinked rapidly. "You don't understand." "I do." My voice cracked. "I understand better than anyone. You think I don't look at that nursery and see a casket? You think I don't lie awake at night wondering if your silence is my fault?" She gasped, stepping back. But I didn't let her go. "I never wanted a child more than I wanted you." "Then why didn't you tell me?" she cried. "Because every time you smiled after bleeding, it broke something in me." My voice dropped. "I didn't know how to hold you without hurting you." Tears rolled down her cheeks now. I hated them, and loved them, because they meant she still felt. She was still mine. She collapsed into me, fists beating against my chest once, twice, before she went limp. I caught her, held her, tight enough to bruise. "You left," I whispered into her hair, "and it nearly killed me. I didn't want to see the future you were building without me." "I wasn't building a future," I growled. "I was preparing for war. With the Bratva. With the world. With you if I had to." Her head tilted back. "Why me?" "Because I'd rather fight you than ever fucking lose you." She surged up, kissed me, like she was starving, like she wanted the war. I shoved her sweater off, dragging it down her arms and throwing it to the floor. Her hands fumbled at my belt, yanking, cursing. "No more soft," she gasped. "No more lies," I growled. We slammed into the wall, her legs around my waist, her back thudding against the wood paneling. "Prove it," she whispered. I didn't hesitate. I buried myself in her in one hard thrust, her cry muffled against my mouth as I devoured every broken sound she gave me. There was no slow, no apology, only need, only now. I drove into her with everything I had left, hands bruising her hips, mouth biting her throat, sweat dripping from my temple as she clawed down my back. Her moans were desperate, raw. Her nails drew blood. And I loved it, because for the first time in weeks, she wasn't afraid to feel. "Say it," I rasped. She shook her head, eyes wild. "Say it," I demanded. "I hate you," she choked. "Liar. I hate that you still love me." "I'll never stop." Her body clenched around me, her thighs shaking, her face twisted in anguish and pleasure, and everything in between. "Say it, Anya," I growled. "I'm yours," she sobbed. Louder. "I'm yours." We collapsed onto the floor, tangled in each other, gasping like weeds surfaced from drowning. She curled into me, forehead pressed to my throat, and whispered, "I didn't leave you because I stopped loving you. I left because I didn't know how to love myself anymore." I kissed the top of her head and held her until her breathing slowed. "You don't have to love yourself," I whispered. "You just have to let me do it for you until you remember how."
Chapter 9. Anya, let me bleed, then touch me. He touched her like he was afraid she'd break. She let him, for weeks, because she had broken. But now she wanted something else. She wanted to be touched, like she could survive it. They didn't speak the next morning, not right away. The snow outside the cabin had thickened into silence. It was the kind of hush that made you forget the world still turned. Boris was making coffee in the small kitchen, shirtless, the faint red marks she'd carved into his back visible even from across the room. His body, brutal and perfect, moved with precision. A man made of violence who'd chosen tenderness over rage, for her. And she'd nearly thrown it all away. Anya sat on the couch, knees pulled up, a blanket draped across her lap. Not because she was cold, but because it gave her hands something to grip. Last night had shattered something in her, but it had also freed something. He'd taken her pain and turned it into flame, and for the first time since the miscarriage, she didn't feel hollow. She felt raw, present, real. He set a mug beside her, didn't speak. She watched the steam curl from the cup, then looked up at him. "You keep looking at me like you're trying to guess what I'll do next," she said. He didn't deny it. "I am." "Why? Because you've surprised me every day since the first time I saw you." She gave a humorless laugh. "You mean when I threw a vodka glass at your head?" "Exactly." He sat down beside her. "Most women throw themselves at Bratva dons. You threw glassware." She smiled, just a flicker, then sobered. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." She hesitated. "Would you have really gone through with it?" "With what?" "The fertility plan, the donor, implantation, all of it." He didn't lie, he never did. "No," he said, "not unless you asked me to. Not unless it was you walking beside me the whole way." "And if I never had?" He met her eyes. "Then I'd have learned to live with less. Not because I wanted less, but because I wanted you more." She inhaled sharply. "God, Boris?" He reached for her then. Not fast, not greedy, just a brush of his hand over her knee, a whisper of contact, but it lit her nerves like gasoline. She caught his wrist, held it, and then she moved, straddled him. His hands flew to her hips, instinctive and possessive, but she held herself just out of reach. "I need you to let me bleed," she whispered. He stilled. "Anya." "I mean it," she said. "I need to stop pretending I'm not still falling apart." Tears welled, not hot, not furious, just true. "I want to cry," she whispered. "I want to scream. I want to come so hard I forget why I ever hated myself." He exhaled slowly. "Then that's what we'll do." His hands slid up her thighs, not soft, steady. "You don't have to be whole for me to touch you," he said. "I want all your pieces." She surged forward and kissed him. The first time he took her that morning, it was on the floor in front of the fireplace. There was no foreplay, no teasing, just raw, messy, real want. She wept while he undressed her, not because she was ashamed, because she wasn't. For the first time, she let herself be seen. Let him see the body that had failed her, the stretch of her belly, flat again, the scars of soft bruises that had faded, the line where she'd cut herself shaving because her hands had been too numb to feel the blade. He kissed each part like it was holy. Her thighs trembled as he pushed into her, thick and hard and real. She arched, gasped, gripped his shoulders with clawed fingers. He didn't stop. He let her sob beneath him and whispered against her skin, "I've got you. Let go. You're mine even when you break. I love the woman who came back from the wreckage. Bleed all over me. I'll take it." Her orgasm hit like lightning, not slow, not quiet. It ripped through her like thunder. Her mouth open in a scream. She didn't care if the world heard. And when it was over, she collapsed onto him, body damp and shaking. He held her, covered her with his chest, his arms, his everything. And she wept, really wept, no holding back, no apology, and he didn't flinch. He rocked her like a child, kissed her hair, let her tears soak into his shoulder, and loved her, through every cracked sob, through every breathless whisper of "I'm sorry." They didn't leave the cabin for 2 days. She bled on the sheets the second night, not from a wound, just her body, rebalancing. She cried when she saw it. He kissed her thighs and said, "Your body is still alive, still fighting, so am I." She made love to him slowly that night, not to reclaim control, not to pretend she was strong, but because it was the only way she knew how to say thank you. And he took it, took her, held her hips and worshipped her with his mouth until she forgot what sadness even tasted like. And when they lay together, sated and still, she whispered, "I think I love myself again." He turned his head, his voice rough. "That's all I ever wanted."
Chapter 10. Boris, she's not fragile. She's fury. They thought she was soft now. That because she'd smiled through pain, bled in silence, walked into rooms with her head high and her belly empty, that she had somehow lost her place. That her crown sat loose on her head, waiting to fall. But Boris knew better. And soon, so would everyone else. The Bratva wives held their little charity luncheon on the third floor of the Smirnov estate, surrounded by gold-framed art and floral centerpieces that reeked of lavender and lies. Anya didn't want to go. Boris hadn't wanted her to go either. But she'd insisted. "I'm not hiding anymore," she'd said, adjusting the emerald studs he'd given her the morning after their fight in the cabin. "They think they smell blood. Let's give them something to choke on instead." So she wore white. A silk-sheath dress that wrapped around her waist like a second skin, sleeveless, backless, fearless. Her hair was in a tight chignon, exposing her throat. Her lips? Crimson. Her heels? Louboutin. Her perfume? His favorite. She was the most dangerous thing in the room. And still they dared. It started with Yelena Kuznetsov. Of course it did. The wife of a Bratva enforcer who'd fathered 2 sons and no loyalty. She greeted Anya with an air kiss and a smile sharper than broken glass. "You look stunning, dear," Yelena said sweetly, adjusting her pearls. "White is so brave. Most women reserve that color for beginnings." Anya didn't blink. "I suppose I can't wear black to every event just to comfort your insecurities." A few women gasped. Yelena's smile thinned. "It's just," she continued, eyes dancing, "we've all been so concerned. Boris is so traditional. We didn't expect him to be so patient, considering." She let the word trail off. "Considering. Considering you failed. Considering your womb is empty." Anya could feel the tension tighten across her shoulders. She gave a tight smile. "That's kind of you, Yelena. Your concern means so much. Almost as much as your husband's fear every time Boris walks into a room." Yelena flushed. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Because Alina Volkova was here too. And she'd been waiting. Watching. She stepped forward slowly, her own silk gown shimmering gold beneath the chandeliers. "Ladies," Alina said, "let's not pretend we don't know the stakes. A Don's wife must secure his line. It's not about vanity. It's about legacy." She looked directly at Anya. She said it like a warning, like a challenge, like she wanted everyone to hear it. Anya said nothing. Not yet. But Boris, watching from the upper balcony through the one-way glass panel, had seen enough. He turned to Mikhail. "I want the ballroom cleared," Boris said coldly. 5 minutes. Mikhail arched a brow. "Everything okay?" "No," he pulled a cigar from his jacket pocket, lit it, and stepped into the corridor like a man on his way to a funeral. 5 minutes later, the music cut. The doors opened, and the room stilled. Because when Boris Smirnov entered a space, so did judgment. And today, he was in no mood to forgive. He didn't look at Yelena or Alina. He looked at Anya. She stood at the center of the room like a column of ice, back straight, eyes calm, shoulders proud. And his fury ignited all over again, because she should never have had to do this alone. He stepped onto the raised platform at the edge of the ballroom, the weight of his presence pressing down on everyone like a second atmosphere. "You want to talk about legacy?" he said. Silence. Dead and suffocating. "Let's talk about what that means." His voice echoed, cold and clipped. "A legacy isn't just a bloodline. It's reputation, loyalty, power." He turned slowly, gaze cutting across the wives who'd spent their entire existence writing their husbands' names like coattails. "And none of you would have any of that if your men hadn't bent the knee to me." Murmurs stirred. Alina paled. Yelena looked like she wanted to shrink into her chair. Boris descended the stairs, each step deliberate, until he stood beside Anya. Then, without breaking eye contact with the crowd, he took her hand, laced his fingers through hers, and kissed her knuckles. "This woman," he said quietly, "is the reason any of you still have crowns." He turned to face the room fully now, fire in his voice. "She's taken bullets meant for me. Walked into meetings where your husbands nearly shit themselves trying to hold eye contact. And not once, has she asked me for permission to be strong." Anya's fingers tightened in his. "If legacy were just about heirs," he continued, "then half of you would be nothing but breeders. But legacy isn't about children." He glanced at Alina. "It's about who you choose to go to war with." His gaze snapped back to Anya, and softened just for her. "I chose her." He raised their joined hands. "And I will choose her every time." The room was silent, until someone clapped. Once, then again, and again. Mikhail. Then 2 more men. Then silence. Again, because no one wanted to clap too loudly and draw attention to themselves. But it was enough. The message was sent. Untouchable. Unreplaceable. Still the queen. Later, in the hallway, Boris cornered Alina against the stone wall. She didn't pretend not to be scared. I didn't mean any harm. He stepped close. Too close. You open your mouth about my wife again, he whispered, and I will strip your husband of everything but his fucking teeth. She swallowed. I'll keep your name, he added, as a lesson. But your power? Gone. One word from me, and you'll be dressing corpses for a living. She nodded, frozen, and he walked away without another glance. That night, he found Anya in their bedroom, standing at the window, looking out over the snow-covered courtyard. She didn't turn when he came in, but she said softly, "You didn't have to do that." "Yes," he said, coming up behind her. "I did." She leaned back into his chest. His arms wrapped around her waist. "They were never going to stop whispering," she murmured. "Then I'll burn their tongues out," he said against her ear. One by one, she turned in his arms and smiled. Not broken, not fake, real, fierce, beautiful. "I'm not fragile," she whispered. "I know. I'm fire. I've always known."
Chapter 11, Anya. I want to try again. She waited until after the guests had gone, until the last glass had been collected from the ballroom, the final silver tray lifted, and the lingering scent of perfume and politics was chased from the air, until the house was quiet again, until she felt like it was hers again. Anya stood in the doorway of Boris's private office, one hand braced on the frame. He didn't look up right away, just sat behind his massive oak desk, sleeves rolled to his elbows, forearms tense as he signed off on some Vori business she didn't care about. She didn't want the throne, didn't want the empire, but she wanted him. He glanced up finally, eyes dark and sharp. He was tired, she could tell. Not just from the day, from everything, from holding her, holding them, holding up the weight of a dynasty on a foundation built of grief and fire. She stepped inside. "I want to try again," she said. He dropped his pen, then slowly leaned back in his chair. "I'm listening," he said carefully. Her eyes burned. "I'm not talking about a baby." A flicker of something, relief, pain, passed over his face. "I mean us," she continued. "I want to try again, not as a wife, not as a queen, not even as the woman you worship like I built your world." He stood, stepping around the desk, his gaze locked on her. "Then who?" he asked softly. She swallowed. "Just me. Anya. The woman who threw vodka at you, like the one who wore a gun under her wedding dress and told you if you kissed her without permission, she'd bite your tongue out." A low, rough laugh slipped from him. "You've always had permission." She ignored the ache in her chest. "I want a week. Just us. No guards, no phones, no Bratva." He studied her. "You want to disappear." She nodded. "I want to remember who we were before all of this, before bloodlines and expectations and miscarriages and funeral bouquets dressed like congratulations." He stepped forward. She didn't move. "I can't promise I'll be easy." She whispered, "I still break sometimes." "So do I," he said. She took a breath. "Will you come with me?" His answer didn't come in words. He cupped the side of her face, lowered his mouth to hers, and kissed her slow. No fire, no fury, just truth. Then he murmured, "I'll burn down the Bratva for a week with you." They left that night. No convoy, no drivers, no staff, just one car, 2 bags, him at the wheel. She didn't ask where they were going. He didn't say, and it was perfect. They drove until the sun broke over the mountains, painting the snow in gold, past villages through forests, until they reached a house so buried in trees it didn't exist on any of their estate maps. She remembered it, vaguely. A safe house he'd taken her to once, years ago when they'd been chased by rivals after a deal went sideways. Back then it hadn't felt like a refuge. It had felt like a cage. Now it felt like peace. The cabin had no marble floors, no surveillance cameras, no expectations, just thick wooden beams, creaky stairs, and a fireplace with ash still lingering from the last time they'd used it. Boris stoked the flames. She unpacked nothing, because for the first time in forever, there was nothing she needed to prepare for. No gala, no war, no ultrasound. Just air, silence, and him. The first 2 days were quiet. They cooked together, ate with their feet up on the coffee table. She read novels with creased pages. He chopped wood like he needed the repetition to keep from unraveling. They didn't talk about what they'd lost, but they didn't ignore it either. There were moments when she'd catch him staring at her across the firelight, his mouth set, eyes hollow, and she knew he was remembering. Moments she curled into his lap, held his hand, and simply existed. No makeup, no polish, no throne, just skin, and scars, and love. It was on the fourth day she brought it up. They were sitting on the porch, wrapped in wool blankets, mugs of tea in hand. "I didn't mean to hate myself for it," she said quietly. He didn't speak. "I didn't mean to make my body a battlefield," she continued, "but I did, and I dragged you into the trenches with me." He turned to her. "I chose to be there." She blinked, then whispered, "But what if it happens again? What if next time I can't come back from it?" His answer came low and raw. "Then I'll carry you. Even if you're nothing but bones and breath, I'll carry you." Her throat tightened. "Do you still want a child?" He didn't lie. "I used to want a legacy. And now," he looked at her, "I want you." That night, they didn't make love. They held love. On the couch, skin to skin, arms and legs tangled, they talked about things that had nothing to do with blood or Bratva. They whispered about their first kiss, their first fight, the time he slipped on black ice and landed flat on his back, and she'd laughed so hard she dropped her gun. He told her he'd never seen anything more beautiful than her laugh in that moment. She told him she was terrified he'd wake up one day and realize she was just a broken promise in silk. He looked her dead in the eyes. "I don't want silk," he said. "I want the woman who came back from hell and still chose me." She cried, and he kissed every tear like it was sacred. On the seventh day, she woke to him cooking. He was shirtless, barefoot, humming off-key. It was the single sexiest thing she'd ever seen. He turned, caught her watching him, and smirked. "I burned the eggs." "Perfect," she said. "I love ruin." He crossed to her, pulled her into his arms. "I think we're going to be okay," she whispered into his chest. He kissed her hair. "We already are."
Chapter 12. Boris, the cabin, the knife, the choice. He should have known peace couldn't last. Not for them. Not in this world. Peace was a borrowed suit on a man born for war, tailored too tight, stitched with lies, destined to split at the seams the moment he reached for something that truly mattered. And Anya mattered more than anything. The morning had started in silence. The good kind. Sunlight poured in through the cabin windows, dappling across the wood floors, turning her hair to gold as she stood barefoot in the kitchen, spooning coffee into the old French press. She was humming, off-key, out of rhythm, free. Boris watched her from the armchair, one arm draped over the backrest, the other resting near the gun he'd kept within arm's reach since they arrived. Not because he expected trouble, but because his hands didn't know how to rest without steel nearby. Still, today had felt different. He almost believed it, until the birds stopped chirping. It was subtle, too subtle for most, but he'd spent years training his ears to catch silence before it killed him. Boris rose slowly, eyes scanning the windows. "Anya," he said softly. She froze mid-hum, glancing back. "Go to the back room. Lock the door." "What?" He was already moving. Calm, fast, silent. He pressed his finger to his lips, then pointed toward the hallway. She didn't argue, didn't scream, just nodded and disappeared. Smart girl. Always mine. He checked the front door. Locked. Deadbolt secured. But the glass? The glass was nothing. He was halfway to the back window when the first shot tore through it. Shards exploded across the kitchen, embedding in the cabinets and counters. He hit the floor, rolled, and came up with the Glock in his hand. Another shot closer. Then footsteps. 2 men. Maybe 3. Silent entry. Black gear. Efficient. Not amateurs. Boris waited until they breached the threshold. Then moved. The first man went down fast. A bullet between the eyes. The second ducked behind the kitchen island, returning fire. Boris rolled behind the fireplace, glass crunching under his boots. But he wasn't concerned about himself. He was concerned about her. "Anya," he roared. No answer. Good. She was still hidden. The second man fired again, grazing Boris's shoulder. Pain flared, hot and sharp. He gritted his teeth, rose, shot once. Then again. The man dropped. Silence. For 1 second. Then the back door burst open. Another. This one moved faster, knife in hand, tactical gear stripped down for speed. Boris tried to raise his gun, but the blood on his arm slicked the grip. The blade flashed. Too fast. It sank deep into Boris's side, hot, twisting too close. He growled, lashed out with his elbow, caught the attacker in the temple. The man stumbled. Boris grabbed a poker from the fireplace, and slammed it across the bastard's skull. The man dropped, twitching. But Boris staggered. Vision swam. Warmth spread down his hip. The knife was still inside him. Fuck. That's when he heard the door creak behind him. He turned and saw her. Anya, barefoot, in a silk nightshirt, blood on her hands. His blood. Her eyes didn't flinch. She didn't scream. She didn't ask for permission. She picked up the gun he'd dropped and raised it like she'd been born for it. Get out of the way, she said. There's still, he tried to warn her. But she wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the final man, the one crawling across the floor toward his own fallen weapon. He reached for it. She shot him. Once. Through the head. Boris blinked. Blood pooled. Silence followed. She dropped the gun, then dropped to him. Boris, she gasped, catching his weight as he collapsed against the floor. Shuh, he gritted out. It's not deep. It's deep, she snapped. There's a knife in you. He gave a half-laugh. That explains the burning. Shut up, she said, voice shaking. But her hands didn't. Her hands were steady. Fast. Efficient. She'd seen him patch wounds before. She mimicked it now, ripping his shirt open, applying pressure, keeping his head angled for breath. You came out, he rasped. You got stabbed, she bit back. Forgive me for abandoning the panic room. He smiled. You shot him. I shot him. Her hands trembled now. Fuck, she whispered. I shot him and I didn't even. There was no thinking, you saved me. She looked at him, eyes wild. Don't do this. I'm not dying. You better not. Because if I die, he whispered, you'll never let me hear the end of it. Tears spilled over her cheeks. I'll haunt you, he added. You already do. They stayed like that until Mikhail's backup team arrived. 20 minutes too late, kicking open the front door, guns raised, eyes wide. Anya didn't move until they took the dead away, and the medic finally forced her off him. She let go only when he was breathing easier, and only then did she realize she was covered in blood. But she wasn't shaking. Not anymore. She was still fire. Still queen. But now she was capable of killing to protect her king. That night, when he was stable, stitched up on the couch, head in her lap, he opened his eyes and said, You shot him like a Smirnov. She smirked. That's because I am a Smirnov. Damn right you are. She kissed his forehead and whispered, Next time, you take the back door.
Chapter 13, Anya. If I can't be a mother, let me be yours. He bled for her. Again, and this time it wasn't metaphorical. Boris lay on the old cabin couch, pale and quiet, the knife wound stitched but angry, dark red seeping slowly through the gauze she'd already changed twice. He refused painkillers. Of course he did. I want to feel it, he'd muttered, jaw clenched. It reminds me I'm still alive. What he didn't say, but she knew, was that he wanted to remember that she was alive too. That she'd walked out of that room with blood on her hands and her crown intact. That she'd saved him. That she hadn't broken. Not this time. The house was quiet. The team Boris had called in to clear the scene and erase any evidence had left them alone for the night. No more bodies, no more guards, just her and him, and a storm howling outside like the ghosts they hadn't buried. She stood at the edge of the couch, a bowl of warm water in one hand, a clean cloth in the other. Don't move, she said softly. His eyes, dark, always watching, opened. You say that like I have the strength to go anywhere. She dropped to her knees beside him and set the bowl down. You drag yourself through broken glass to reach a gun. He smiled, weak but real. I have. I know. She peeled the bandage back. His skin was flushed and swollen around the stitches. Angry red. Infected, maybe. She pressed the warm cloth to it gently, wiping away the dried blood. He winced. Sorry, she murmured. Don't be. I like your hands on me. Her chest ached. Even when I'm scrubbing blood off you? Especially then. She looked up at him, tears building quietly. Boris, she whispered, you could have died, but I didn't. And if I hadn't come out when I did... He reached for her hand, his grip weak but still solid. You did. She looked down. I didn't even think. I saw him crawling for the gun and I just pulled the trigger. You did more than that. His voice was hoarse. You saved me. You didn't freeze. You didn't flinch. She let out a shuddering breath. I didn't feel human. No, he said. You felt like mine. She looked up again. Their eyes locked. And he said, so quiet she almost missed it. If I can't have a son, I want to die in the arms of the woman who knows how to kill for me. Her breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying, he rasped, that if you can't be a mother, then let me be yours. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I've never needed a child, he whispered. I just needed to be someone's. Her heart shattered and reassembled. You already are, she said. You always have been. He smiled, just slightly. I remember the first night we spent in this place, he said. You called me a tyrant for trying to light the fire for you. You built it all wrong. It still burned. So did we. She set the cloth down, leaned in close, and pressed her lips to his temple. Rest, she whispered. I'll stay with you. His fingers tangled weakly in her sweater. You're not going anywhere? Not even if you beg me to. That night, he woke in a fever. Sweat beaded down his chest, his body trembling with pain. She wiped his forehead, stroked his hair, whispered lullabies in a language neither of them had spoken since childhood. He murmured her name once, then again. Then, I dreamt you died. She froze. You bled out in the bathroom, he mumbled, voice dazed. Alone, and I didn't find you until it was too late. I was holding you and I couldn't do anything. She swallowed hard. That didn't happen. It could have. But it didn't. He blinked slowly, pupils unfocused. I wanted to trade my body for yours. Let the pain take me instead. She kissed his chest over the scar left by a bullet he'd taken for her in Vienna. You're not allowed to die for me, she whispered. I already did, he murmured. A little, when I saw the blood. Her breath hitched. I failed you, he said. No, she said fiercely. I failed me. You never left. You never stopped choosing me. He tried to lift a hand. Couldn't. She guided it to her heart. This beats for you, she whispered. It always has. She didn't sleep that night. She sat on the floor beside him, her hand in his, eyes on his chest to make sure it still rose, and when the fever finally broke just before dawn, she broke too, broke open. She whispered her worst fear aloud, that she was a burden, a hollowed woman pretending to be whole, that someday he'd wake up and wonder what it would have been like with someone who could give him a future. And he opened his eyes, still weak but steady, and said, with fire even in his whisper, I don't want a woman who gives me a future. I want a woman who is my future. When morning came, he was stronger, not healed, but no longer at death's edge. He managed to sit up. She brought him water. He tugged her down into his lap. I keep thinking, he said, about how you looked holding that gun. Terrified, she teased. No, certain. Her smile faded. I saw you clearly for the first time, he said, not just as my wife, not even as my queen. Then what? As the woman I'll kneel to when the world ends. She kissed him softly and whispered back, then let me hold it up until it does.
Chapter 14, Boris. She thinks I'm a king. But I was made for her. There was a room in the Vori headquarters where kings were made. A sanctum lined in black marble and shadows. Every man who stepped into it had the weight of a nation in his blood or on his hands. This was where oaths were carved in silence, where blood replaced ink, where legacies were decided. Today, that room was watching him. Boris Smirnov stood at the head of the table, dressed in black on black, his cufflinks glinting like blades. The scar on his side ached, but he didn't show it. He didn't even limp. He stood tall, cold, deadly, and he brought war in his silence. The Bratva council was assembled, all 12 men who called themselves leaders. Only 2 of them were brave enough to meet his eyes. The others fidgeted, cleared their throats, waited. Boris didn't speak. Not yet. He wanted them uncomfortable. They should be. Because today wasn't about politics. It wasn't about power. It was about her. When they finally began to speak, it came in whispers disguised as questions. Rumors, said Viktor Pavlenko, the eldest. About the cabin. About the attack. I cleaned up my house, Boris replied, voice flat. No help needed. A pause. Then the real concern surfaced. Still no air. Boris didn't blink. Still no vacancy in my bed. A few exchanged glances. You know what they're saying, Smirnov, muttered Yegor Malinov, a sour-faced relic from a bloodline long past its prime. You're building a dynasty on sand. No sons. No daughters. No future. That's when Boris smiled. The kind of smile that had preceded executions, deals, and the occasional scorched earth. You're mistaken, he said coolly. I have a legacy. She sleeps beside me every night. A few laughed. Nervous. Uncertain. But Boris didn't laugh. He laid a velvet box on the table. Slowly opened it. Inside was a ring. Not gold. Not diamond encrusted. Forged iron. Raw and black, hammered by a Bratva weaponsmith. Inlaid with a single word, Anya. He looked around the table, voice sharp as a blade unsheathed. You want a bloodline. I want a blood oath. And I made mine to a woman who stood over my bleeding body and killed the man who meant to end me. Dead silence. He leaned forward. Tell me what kind of legacy you'd prefer. Sons who haven't tasted war, or a woman who would walk into it and set the sky on fire to pull me out. No one answered. He tapped the box once. This is the new future. No heirs. No sons. Just her. And if that offends your fragile idea of power, you're welcome to challenge me for the seat. He let the words settle, then added softly, I'll bury you before your first insult leaves your tongue. They didn't speak again. Not for a long time. And when Boris walked out of that room, his shoulders straight, the ring box in his coat pocket, not a single man dared stop him. He didn't need sons. He had her. And that was more dangerous than any army. When he returned to the estate, the house was quiet. Anya was in the solarium, curled on the long velvet chaise reading. Her hair was up. She wore one of his button-down shirts, sleeves rolled, legs bare and stretched out. She looked like every dream he never let himself have, and every reason he fought for the life he now owned. She looked up when he walked in, paused. You're bleeding again, she murmured, setting the book down and moving toward him. Not my blood, he lied. She arched a brow. Still stitched. Still standing. She pressed a hand to his chest, eyes flicking over his face. They made you fight them, didn't they? No, he said. They listened. She didn't speak. So he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the ring. She stared at it, then at him. What is this? My real legacy, he said. This is the only crown I'll ever wear. Yours. She blinked. Slowly. He stepped closer. In front of 12 men with power and pride and names older than the syndicate itself, I told them that my future isn't a son. He lifted the ring. My future is you. Her lip trembled. He took her hand, slid the forged iron ring onto her middle finger beneath the diamond wedding band. It's not beautiful, he said. It's not polished. She whispered, it's perfect. I had it made from the same steel that saved me in Kazan, he said. Fused with iron from the bullet you dug out of me. Her breath caught. He kissed her fingers, then her wrist, then her mouth. Anya, he murmured, they think I'm a king. But the truth is, I was made for you. I exist for you. If the throne vanished tomorrow, I'd still kneel at your feet. She buried her face in his chest and sobbed, not from pain, from everything, from the weight of being seen, from the truth of being chosen, not for what she could give him, but for who she already was. He lifted her, carried her to the chaise, and laid her down gently. He worshipped her body with his mouth, his hands, his voice, told her she was his empire, his war, his only peace. And as he slid into her, slow and reverent, she whispered, then let me wear this kingdom like your skin.
Chapter 15. Anya, bloodlines be damned. There was a box in the back of her closet. Small, hidden behind designer gowns, pressed wool, and the black lace she only wore when Boris needed to remember who was his. She hadn't touched the box in months, hadn't dared. But today, after everything, the cabin, the attack, the blood, the ring, the way Boris had laid her down like worship and whispered that he existed for her, not for legacy. She opened it. Inside was every hope she'd buried. A tiny pair of hand-knitted booties in ivory. The first sonogram, printed in black and white, the faintest curve of what might have been. A letter she'd never finished writing. To our child, I hope you get your father's eyes. I hope you get his fire. I hope. She closed the lid, but this time she didn't put it back on the shelf. She walked with it to the marble hearth in the main bedroom. Knelt, lit the fire, and set the box in the flames. It burned quietly. No screams, no flash of fury, just closure and freedom. When Boris found her hours later, she was seated on the floor in front of the fire, legs crossed, a silk slip clinging to her skin like liquid shadow. The scent of ashes clung to the air. He went still in the doorway. You burned it, he said softly. She nodded. All of it. His jaw worked once. You didn't have to. I did. She turned, eyes clear. Because I don't need it anymore. I don't need ghosts to define my worth. He walked toward her, slow and deliberate. You've never been defined by what you lost. No, she said, but I let myself believe I was. She reached for him and he dropped to his knees beside her like it was instinct. She ran a hand down his jaw. They wanted a dynasty. We gave them a revolution. I don't want to be the woman who mourns a bloodline that never existed. You're not. I want to be the one who built a kingdom from love instead. He leaned in, resting his forehead against hers. You are? He murmured. Every time I walk into a room and they bow, it's because they know I would burn everything for you, and they fear that kind of devotion. She closed her eyes, and finally said the words out loud. Bloodlines be damned. I'm done grieving a throne I never wanted. He cupped her face. Then what do you want? She opened her eyes. You, us, this. Her voice dropped. And I want them to know I'm not just your queen, I'm your weapon. The next day she acted on it. No more silk shadows, no more pretty distractions. She wore black, tailored, lethal, military cut. Her hair was twisted into a tight braid, a pistol holstered at her thigh, and she walked into the Bratva War Council meeting without an invitation. The room stilled. Boris looked up from the head of the table, lips curling into the faintest grin. She stopped beside him. Gentlemen, she said, voice like velvet on a loaded trigger. I'm not here to beg for respect. I'm here to remind you that the woman who stood over your Pakon's bleeding body was me. Murmurs rose. She didn't flinch. If you have something to say about wombs and heirs, say it now, because this is the only time you'll get to speak before I start burning down reputations. Someone stood. She didn't care who. He opened his mouth. Boris cut him off. Sit, before she reloads. The man sat. Fast. She turned to Boris. Permission to command? He smiled. Granted. That night, back in their room, Boris pinned her against the wall before she even stepped out of her boots. You scared the hell out of them. She smirked. Good. He leaned in, voice rough. You were magnificent. I always am. Do you feel it now? He asked. What? Who you are. She paused, then whispered, finally. He lifted her, carried her to bed, didn't undress her, tore her clothes off, piece by piece. You burned our ghosts, he rasped against her skin. Now I'm going to worship what rose from the ashes. She arched into him, moaned as he slid inside. This wasn't mourning. This was reigniting. This was love that had nothing to do with softness and everything to do with survival. He moved inside her with purpose, each thrust a vow, each kiss a signature. And when she came, it wasn't with a scream, it was with a laugh, a bright, cracked, beautiful laugh. Because for the first time since that bathroom floor, she didn't feel broken. She felt reborn. After, he curled around her, breath hot on her neck. You're still shaking, he murmured. Adrenaline, she said. No. He pulled her closer. It's power. She smiled into the dark. I don't need to carry a child. No, he whispered. You carry me. And she did. Always had. Always would.
Chapter 16 Boris. Every night. I choose her again. She had no idea what she did to him. Every time she walked into a room now, chin high, shoulders squared, fire in her eyes, something inside Boris shattered and rebuilt itself. This was not the woman he'd married. This was the woman he'd bled for, fought for, almost died for. This was the woman who came back from the grave of her own grief and stood beside him, not as a wife or a symbol, but as his reason. And tonight, he needed to remind her that he still chose her. Not out of duty, not out of guilt, but out of hunger. The mansion was quiet. The Bratva had been fed, pleased, and dismissed. The house staff vanished after midnight, leaving them in the echo of moonlight and marble silence. He found her in their bedroom, seated at her vanity. Her braid had come undone, a few strands clinging to her neck. She wore nothing but one of his silk dress shirts, sleeves rolled up, collar unbuttoned, hem brushing the tops of her thighs. And she was humming, softly, a tune she only made when she was safe. He stood in the doorway for a moment, just watching her. Her legs crossed delicately, one heel slipping off her foot. Her fingers were applying lotion to her arms, slow and absent-minded, unaware of the way she looked, unaware of how wrecked he was, just standing there. He crossed the room. You always stare like that? She asked, not looking at him. Yes, he said. Every night. She smiled faintly. Do I look different now? You look like the last calm breath before a war. She turned. He was already behind her. His hands slid over her shoulders, down her arms, around her waist. She exhaled slowly. You're tense. I'm starving. For what? You. He pulled her to her feet, turned her toward the mirror. Their eyes met in the reflection, hers wide and quiet, his dark and certain. He tugged the shirt open, button by button. You're still healing, she whispered. So are you. He peeled the shirt off her shoulders, let it fall. She stood there, bare, glowing under the soft amber light. Her skin bore scars, memories, history. And to him, there was nothing more beautiful. Boris, her voice wavered. I'm not going to make love to you because you're hurting, he said softly. I'm going to make love to you because I want to. She closed her eyes. I'm going to remind you, he murmured, lips brushing her shoulder, that you are not just strong. You're desirable. You're not just my queen. You're my woman. Her breath caught. He guided her to the bed, laid her down, climbed over her, and kissed her like it was the first time all over again. He didn't rush. He mapped every inch of her body with his mouth, like a territory only he could claim. She arched beneath him, hands in his hair, legs wrapping around his hips like instinct. When he slid inside her, she gasped. Boris, yes, he breathed against her ear. Every night, every breath. I choose you. He moved slowly, deeply. Every stroke a vow, every thrust an offering. And she took all of it. Her fingers clawed his back, her hips met his without fear, without hesitation. There was no grief left between them. Only craving. Only devotion. She came once, then twice, sobbing his name the second time, her voice broken, her heart open. He followed soon after, burying his face in her neck as his body found release, whispering, mine. Always mine. And when it was over, when their bodies stilled and their breath slowed, he stayed wrapped around her, holding her like she was the only real thing in the world. Because she was. She always had been. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. Time didn't exist in the dark when she was in his arms. She stirred. Why do you keep choosing me? She asked softly. He looked down at her and gave her the truth. Because every night, I get the chance to worship the woman who didn't walk away. She blinked. I should have, she whispered. But you didn't. And you won't. No, she agreed. I won't. He kissed her temple. You keep me alive, she said. And you make me a man worth loving. She curled into him. He pulled the blanket over them both. And for the first time in months, they slept. Really slept. No ghosts. No threats. Just the echo of devotion. The kind that didn't need heirs. Or crowns. Or legacy. Just two bodies. Two souls. Two warriors. Choosing each other again. And again. And again.
Chapter 17. Anya. The girl I was. The queen I became. The girl she used to be would never have survived this life. That girl. The one who wore soft pastels and smiled too wide in rooms full of people who wanted her silent. She would have drowned the moment she married a man like Boris Smirnov. But that girl was dead now, burned in the fire with the baby booties, silenced in the blood-stained bathroom tiles, buried in the ashes of who she thought she was supposed to be, and in her place stood someone forged, not created, not grown, forged, under heat and pressure and loss, and now, as Anya adjusted the collar of her black silk blouse and looked into the mirror, she no longer saw the girl who had been waiting for permission to matter. She saw the queen who had taken her place at the throne, not by birthright, not by power, but by surviving the crucible and choosing to stay. Boris was in the West Wing, dealing with the aftermath of the council's decision. They'd finally stopped murmuring about heirs, because she had shut them up for good, not with words, with work. Over the last month, she'd taken everything she once viewed as a burden, her place beside him, her voice in a room of men, her body that didn't give him children, and turned it into something sharper than any weapon. Now, Anya moved behind the scenes like the shadow of a blade. She didn't command the Bratva. She influenced it. A whisper in Boris's ear before he entered a meeting. A folded note slipped into Mikhail's palm during breakfast. A business deal routed through Dubai because she remembered a conversation over champagne 6 months ago when someone dropped the name of a minor oil magnate who owed her a favor. She didn't want credit. She didn't want a title. But she would build her husband's empire until it stood so high the world needed maps just to find the base. Not because she had to, but because she chose to. That afternoon she sat in the private study Boris rarely let anyone enter. It was where he kept the real books, not the shell accounts, the blood ones, the ledgers that could start wars or end dynasties. She was reviewing one of them now, carefully annotated in his small, precise handwriting. A single name caught her eye. Volkov. Again. They weren't finished then. The family had gone quiet since the attack at the cabin, but Anya knew silence didn't mean surrender. She circled the name with red ink. Then she made a call. That night, when Boris found her curled up on the couch with the ledger still open beside her, his eyes narrowed. "You've been working." She arched a brow. "And you haven't?" He moved to her, pulled her into his lap without waiting for permission. "You're not supposed to carry this weight." "I'm not carrying it," she said, looping her arms around his neck. "I'm choosing to lift it with you." He rested his forehead against hers. "This wasn't the life I wanted for you." "It's not the life you gave me, it's the one we built." He pulled back, looked her over. "You've changed." She smiled. "I've remembered who I am." He frowned slightly. "I wasn't born a queen," she said, voice soft. "I became one. And not because I loved you, but because I survived with you. That's something different." His grip on her tightened. "You still think I'm too fragile," she said. "No," he said after a beat. "I think you're terrifying, but I'll never stop wanting to protect you." She cupped his face. "Then let me protect you too." It happened 2 nights later. Anya had gone to the old greenhouse, their sanctuary, alone. She needed time. The plants had overgrown, wild and beautiful, a reflection of what her heart had become. But something was wrong. The air felt still, too still. She turned, and there he was, Volkov, the cousin, the one who had sent the men to the cabin. "You're a hard woman to find," he said. She didn't panic, didn't scream, didn't run. She stepped backward, slowly, toward the wall where Boris kept a blade hidden behind a loose panel. "I'm not hiding," she said. He smiled, lips curling like a knife. "No, but your husband hides behind you now." She didn't hesitate. She pulled the blade. "Come any closer," she said, "and I'll remind you why men like you only speak when the real rulers let them." His smile vanished. "You won't kill me." "No," she said, "I'll carve you." Boris arrived 5 minutes later, having been alerted by the silent perimeter alarm she triggered with her ankle. He found Volkov bleeding and unconscious at Anya's feet, her blouse torn at the shoulder, her hands bloodied. She didn't look at him. She just said, calm as ever, "We need to expand the perimeter." He breached the west side without resistance. Boris walked over, stared down at the man groaning at her feet, then looked at her. She was shaking now, only slightly. He caught her, held her. She let out a breath and whispered, "I didn't hesitate." He brushed a bloody strand of hair behind her ear. "That's what makes you queen." Later that night, after Mikhail had dragged Volkov off to wherever men like that disappeared, Boris sat beside her in bed, his hands tangled in hers. "I knew you were capable," he said, "but I never wanted you to need to be." She turned her head. "I don't need to be," she said, "but I am, and it's not for them. It's for you. For us." He pressed her hand to his chest. "You were once the girl who didn't know if she was enough," he whispered. She nodded. "And now?" She looked him in the eye. "I'm the queen who will kill for you, lie for you, build for you, burn for you." He kissed her, hard, then murmured against her lips, "You always were. I just had to survive long enough to deserve it."
Chapter 18 Boris. If she ever leaves me, it'll be in a coffin. Boris had faced death more times than he could count. He'd walked through bullets, burned men alive, buried traitors with his bare hands. But nothing prepared him for the moment he found Anya's room empty. No note, no guards, no trace, only a cracked glass on the floor and the scent of her perfume lingering like a ghost. He didn't panic. He killed the feeling before it formed, because panic didn't belong to kings. And he wasn't just a king. He was a man who would ruin countries if someone touched his wife. The house was already on lockdown by the time he reached the main floor. Mikhail met him in the hall, pale and sweating, holding a phone with trembling fingers. "She's gone," Mikhail said. "We had 2 guards down at the back entrance. Drugged." Boris didn't blink. Cameras. Dead. Looped feed. This was planned. Boris took the phone, opened the GPS tracker he'd embedded in the lining of Anya's locket, the one he gave her the day she bled in the bathroom. Offline, he handed the phone back and turned to the men standing nearby. "Shut down Moscow. Nothing moves in or out." One of them hesitated. "Sir, the syndicate." "I don't give a fuck about the syndicate." His voice cracked across the room like thunder. "If my wife dies," he said slowly, dangerously, "I'll make sure every one of you wishes they had first." Mikhail stepped closer. "There's something else." Boris turned his head. "The way the guards were taken out. It's not Bratva." "Then who?" Mikhail swallowed. "It's him." The name came like a bullet to the ribs. Alexei Chernov, Anya's first fiancé, the one her father promised her to, the one who put bruises on her soul long before Boris ever touched her body. He was supposed to be dead. Boris had ordered it himself. Apparently, it hadn't stuck. "She never told me what he did." Boris said quietly later, while riding in the back of the armored vehicle. Not really. She didn't have to, Mikhail replied. You saw it. You lived through it with her. I should have found him sooner. You thought you did. That was my mistake. Boris looked out the window at the blackness of Moscow's underworld rolling by. She once told me she wasn't afraid of dying, he said. She was afraid of being forgotten, of fading. He turned to Mikhail, and the look in his eyes could have stopped clocks. If she ever leaves me, he whispered, it'll be in a coffin, and I'll go in right after. They found the first clue in the warehouse district. One of Alexei's old safe houses, burned out, long since abandoned. But the scent of blood was fresh. In the corner, a red smear. Fingernails. Painted dark. Chipped. Anya's. Boris knelt beside them. His hand shook as he picked one up. The rage that bloomed inside him was ancient. He found her 36 hours later. In a shipping container docked at a private port near the Baltic Sea. Bound. Beaten. Alive. But barely. He shot 3 men before the others even knew he was there. Broke the 4th's neck with one hand. Slit the 5th's throat so slowly the man begged before the blood stopped him. And then he saw her. She was chained to a steel chair. Wrists bleeding. Lips split. Cheek bruised. But her eyes were still fire. About time, she rasped. He dropped to his knees in front of her. I'm here. You're late. I had to kill a few people on the way. She tried to smile. Failed. He unchained her, hands trembling for the first time in years. When she fell against him, he caught her. He always would. Back at the estate, the doctor begged him to leave the room. He refused. He sat beside her as she was stitched, as she cried through broken ribs, as she whispered Alexei's name once, and only once, before her throat closed with rage. And when the doctor left, he stayed. He washed her face, brushed her hair, wrapped her hand in his, and whispered every truth he'd never said aloud. I love you. I'm sorry. I failed you. I'll never forgive myself. You are everything. She didn't speak for a day. Then, as snow fell outside their window, she finally turned to him. You didn't fail me. He looked at her. She was pale, wrapped in bandages, hair loose and tangled, and she was still the most powerful thing he'd ever seen. Anya, he thought I was still afraid of him, she whispered. He thought because I broke once, I'd do it again. You didn't. No, she said, because you taught me how to fight. You made me mine again. He reached for her hand. I thought I lost you. You'll never lose me. He stared at her for a long time, then stood, crossed the room, opened the drawer beside the bed, pulled out his Glock. Where are you going? She asked. He kissed her forehead. To finish the job I should have finished years ago. She grabbed his wrist. Hard. Take me with you. He blinked. No, he said. You need to rest. I need to see him die. He hesitated. She stood, wincing, bleeding, but standing. Still fire. I won't be his victim again, she said. I'll be his judge. An hour later, they stood together over Alexei's body. Anya pulled the trigger. Twice. And as the blood pooled, she whispered, This is for every time I thought I didn't deserve to live. Boris held her afterward. Not like something broken, but like something holy. That night, as they lay in bed, their fingers laced, breath slow and synced, he whispered, I wasn't made to be king. She turned to him, eyes soft in the dark. I was made to be yours.
Chapter 19, Anya. I was never meant to give you an heir. I was meant to give you forever. The scars would always be there, some on her skin, some beneath it. The ones on her wrists would fade. The ones on her heart had learned how to stay quiet. But tonight wasn't about the pain. Tonight was about everything that came after. Anya stood barefoot on the balcony of their private suite. The city stretched below like a flickering ocean of light. Moscow's cold wind kissed her bare arms, but she didn't flinch. She'd stood in colder places, darker places. She was dressed in midnight blue silk, simple, elegant, no crown, just her. Behind her she heard him, barefoot steps across the marble, the sound of him breathing. Boris never entered a room. He arrived, and even now, even after everything, her body reacted to the gravity of him. I thought I'd find you here, he said softly. She didn't turn. It's quiet out here. He stepped behind her, wrapped a cashmere blanket over her shoulders, his arms tightening around her waist from behind. You should be in bed, he murmured. I'm tired of sleeping. He rested his chin on her shoulder. Then what do you want? She closed her eyes, felt his heartbeat in her back, his warmth at her spine. I want to give you something, she said. You've already given me everything. Not this. She turned in his arms, tipped her chin up. Not all promises come in the shape of a child, she said. His jaw flexed. The pain in his eyes was still there, quiet now, but ever present. I know that, he said. No, I don't think you do. She stepped back from him just enough to reach into the folds of her silk wrap, pulled out a small black box. I've been working on something. He stared at it, then at her. What is it? She opened it. Inside was a simple gold chain, but it wasn't the chain that mattered. It was the charm. One word, etched in glass and steel, forever. No birth date, no name, no initials, just one vow. I had it made the night after we buried him, she said quietly. The son we didn't get to meet. Boris's throat bobbed. You wore your grief in your bones, she said, and I carried mine in silence. But this is what's left when the silence ends. She reached for him, fastened the chain around his neck. This is the only thing I can promise you, she whispered. Not an heir, not a dynasty. She rested her palm over his heart. Just forever. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there, wind cutting around them, as the weight of her gift settled over him like armor. When he finally found his voice, it broke. You really think that's all I ever wanted from you? I don't know what you wanted, I just know what you needed, and you needed to be seen, chosen, loved. I've always been yours, and now you always will be. He crushed her to him. She didn't resist. Later, they lay on the fur rug inside their bedroom, the fire casting slow shadows on the walls. He traced the line of her collarbone with his thumb. You were always meant for more than this world, he murmured. She laughed, soft and tired. And yet here I am, married to the king of shadows. No. He leaned in, brushed his lips against hers. I'm married to the queen who taught me how to want more than survival. She swallowed hard. He rolled onto his side, looking down at her. Do you remember the first time I told you I loved you? I thought you were bleeding out. I was. You whispered it like a confession. It was. He took her hand, kissed each knuckle like a prayer. I don't want sons, Anya. I don't want daughters. I want nights like this. I want you. I want your sharp tongue and your quiet strength. I want the way you breathe when you sleep and the sound you make when I touch your shoulder in the dark. Her eyes filled. And if forever is all you can give me, he whispered, then that's enough to bury the world with. They made love then, not like survivors, not like rulers, like two people who had lost and chosen anyway. Her tears soaked his shoulder. His hand cradled her hip, and when she whispered his name in the moment her soul cracked open again, he kissed her like a vow. Not a promise of what was coming, a confirmation of what already was. Sometime after midnight she rose from bed and found him at the window, bare-chested, wearing only the gold chain she gave him. He looked like a god. She came up behind him, wrapped her arms around his waist. I love you, she whispered. I know. You're not afraid anymore, are you? No. Why? He turned, kissed her forehead. Because for the first time in my life, I don't need an empire to feel like a man. They watched the sunrise together, silent. No crowns, no heirs, no regrets, just hands, hearts, and the promise that tomorrow and every day after they would choose each other again, no matter the cost.
Chapter 20. Boris and Anya. You wanted a dynasty. We gave you love instead, Boris. They buried her father beneath gray stone in silence. The last of the Egorovs. No funeral. No press. Just a cold wind, a quiet priest, and a hole deep enough to swallow everything Anya had once feared she owed. She stood beside him, dressed in black, a veil over her eyes, her spine straight as a blade. She didn't cry. He didn't expect her to. That wasn't who she was anymore. But when the dirt hit the lid, he felt her fingers grip his, and that was enough. The past was over. There was only them now. You didn't have to come, she said quietly, as the car rolled away from the cemetery. I never let you stand alone. You would have burned that grave yourself if I asked. I still will, he said. Say the word. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes yet. He leaned over, kissed her temple. It's over, he said. No, she looked out the window. It's beginning.
Anya. 3 months later, the Smirnov estate no longer looked like a fortress. There were still guards, still checkpoints, still steel beneath the surface. But the walls were warmer, the windows wider, the gates just a little slower to close. Because she wasn't building a kingdom of fear anymore. She was building a home. It didn't come with lullabies or cribs or the echo of tiny feet. But it came with dinners shared in silence and laughter, books scattered between war documents, late-night chess matches where no one ever really won, and Boris, always Boris, appearing in doorways with a tired smirk and eyes only for her. She never told him, but sometimes she'd wake in the middle of the night and just watch him, how he slept with one hand beneath the pillow, how his brow creased even in dreams, how he reached for her like instinct, like a man who feared she might vanish between heartbeats. It never stopped breaking her, and healing her all at once. She didn't need a baby to feel full. She had this. She had him.
Boris, one evening in spring, he took her back to the cabin. It hadn't been touched since the night of the bloodshed, but the air was clean now. The trees thick and green. The ghosts gone. He lit the fire, cooked her dinner with his bare hands, let her sit on the deck with a glass of wine and nothing but the breeze for company. And when he joined her, she said the one thing he didn't expect. "I want to build something." "You have." "No," she said. "I want to build ours. Not yours. Not mine. Ours." "What does that mean?" "It means you don't need a son to carry your name, and I don't need a child to leave something behind." She looked at him, eyes bright. "Let's build a legacy without blood. Let's start something that doesn't need heirs to live. Let's make them remember us because we were the first to say love mattered more than dynasty." He stared at her and said the only thing that ever felt like enough. "Yes."
Anya, they started with a school, not a charity, not a foundation, a haven for the broken girls of Moscow, the ones no one wanted, the ones who had been bought, sold, used, and discarded. Anya named it Solnishko, little son. She taught them to read, to fight, to never bow again. Boris funded it quietly. No press, no photos, just his signature scrawled across every contract, his presence lurking in every corner, making sure no one dared touch what was hers. And then came the safe house. And the security firm. And the jobs they gave to women who'd been told they were only good for lying still. Together, they became more than feared. They became respected. They rewrote the future, not with a cradle, but with choice.
Boris, on the 1-year anniversary of the cabin attack, he returned to the site with Anya. This time, they didn't carry weapons. They carried a bottle of wine and a single photograph. It was them, standing on the roof of the Solnishko school, arms wrapped around each other, the building alive behind them. They framed it, mounted it to a stone at the edge of the woods, a quiet monument to survival, to devotion, to everything they'd lost and everything they'd built anyway.
Anya, one night, lying in bed, she asked him, "If we had a child, what would we name them?" He turned to her. "Does it matter?" "No." She paused. "But I'd name them after you." He kissed her then, so softly it hurt. "You already did," he whispered. "You made everything ours."
Epilogue. The world still whispered about the Smirnovs, the dynasty with no heir, the king who turned down legacy for loyalty, the queen who ruled not with a crown, but with a stare that made men sit up straighter. They called them many things. Too powerful, too dangerous, too in love. But behind closed doors, Boris and Anya didn't care. They sat together by firelight, laughed over black coffee, slept entangled like a war that never ended. And every morning, before the sun rose, Boris would pull her close and whisper, "You wanted a dynasty," and Anya would smile, kiss his chest, and finish it for him. But we gave them love instead. They wanted a bloodline. She gave him forever instead. No heirs, no mercy, just two souls, forged in pain, rising in power, and choosing each other again and again. Until the end. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more Mafia tales. Until next time, stay loyal.